In 1851, a three-masted merchant bark named the Niantic sat wedged into the mudflats of San Francisco, 3 blocks inland from the water. Its hull was carved open to serve as a hotel, while its masts still pierced the sky above Market Street. Within a year, fire reduced it to charred ribs. Within 2, the entire ship vanished beneath landfill that would become the foundation of the financial district. Today, when construction crews excavate for new skyscrapers, their drills strike wooden hulls 40 feet down. The remains of at least 500 abandoned vessels form the literal bedrock of modern downtown. These were not shipwrecks. They were deliberate burials, a citywide act of strategic erasure that transformed maritime disaster into real estate. The forest of masts rises from the mudflats like burned trees after wildfire, stretching in uneven rows from the actual shore out to where the water should be deep but is not. Hulls list at impossible angles, some cracked open, some still riding high despite having no water beneath their keels. The smell is rot and salt and fresh-cut lumber where someone has started sawing planks from a hull for building material. You can walk between ships on planks laid across the mud, and every third vessel has a hand-painted sign. Rooms, storage, whiskey. Between June 1849 and early 1850, approximately 500 to 600 ships arrived in San Francisco Bay, carrying gold rush prospectors. Crews abandoned their vessels almost immediately upon arrival, sometimes within hours, leaving captains stranded with empty ships and no way to sail them. By late 1850, the shallow waters near shore were so clogged with abandoned hulls that new ships could not dock. Contemporary accounts from the Alta California newspaper describe captains offering triple wages, then quintuple wages, then any amount of gold a man could name. None of it worked. Ship captains could not hire replacement crews at any price because a single day of gold panning could earn a laborer $20, while a month of sailor wages paid only $10 to $15 total. The economic inversion was so severe that some captains deliberately beached their own ships to sell the timber, making more money from the vessel's destruction than from years of cargo transport. Jerry McMullen's research into paddle wheel shipping records shows that the greatest maritime traffic jam in American history occurred not from too many ships arriving, but from too many ships never leaving. The city faced a choice: spend months dismantling hundreds of massive wooden ships, or make them disappear another way. The answer became visible in the form of buildings that should not exist. The Niantic arrived in San Francisco on July 5, 1849, and was immediately dragged onto the mudflats at Clay Street and converted into a warehouse and hotel. The ship's hull was cut open to create storefronts at street level, while the deck became the second floor of a hotel. The Niantic operated as a functioning building for over a year, with its original masts serving as structural supports. Inside the Niantic's hull, the curve of the ship's ribs forms the walls and ceiling of a hotel room. The floor tilts slightly, not from damage but from the ship's natural lines, built to cut through water, not support furniture. Through the porthole window, you see not ocean but a muddy street where men drive stakes for another building's foundation. Above your head, the deck creaks with footsteps from the saloon on the second floor. The room smells like tar and tobacco smoke and damp wood that will never fully dry. The Niantic was not beached because it was damaged. Archaeological reports by Alan Pastron show it was a nearly new ship, launched in 1835 and still seaworthy. The owner, Henry Vergé, made the economic calculation that the ship was worth more as stationary real estate than as mobile cargo transport, because San Francisco lot rent was 100 times higher than East Coast rates, but there was no actual land available to build on. The most valuable thing a ship owner could do with a perfectly functional ocean-going vessel was to permanently beach it and cut doors in its side. The shipbuildings represent a moment where the built environment evolved faster than architectural terminology. There was no word for what the Niantic had become, because nothing like it had existed before, forcing the collapse of vessel and structure into a single impossible object. Historic maps from the David Rumsey collection show dozens of ships marked not as wreckage, but as addresses, with property lines running through their cargo holds. On May 4th, 1851, fire swept through the district where the Niantic sat. When the flames reached the old ship's hull, the tar that had kept it watertight became fuel. The sand comes in wagon loads, dumped in a continuous stream from the western hills. It pours over the Niantic's blackened ribs, filling the spaces between structural timbers, rising inch by inch until the curve of the hull disappears. Workers level the sand with rakes, compacting it, already planning the building that will stand here. Below their feet, the ship's cargo hold still contains intact barrels of pork and flour, bottles of medicine, a ship's bell. Within 6 months, no one will remember exactly where the ship sat. Within 20 years, most will forget the ships were ever here at all. After the 1851 fire burned the Niantic to the waterline, city engineers made no attempt to remove the hull. They simply began dumping sand and rubble directly on top of it. Between 1849 and 1852, San Francisco extended its shoreline by over 3 blocks through systematic landfill, burying not just wrecks, but functioning shipbuildings. The fill material came from sand dunes that once covered the peninsula. Crews literally relocated entire hills to bury the ships. The decision to bury rather than dismantle was purely economic, but created an accidental time capsule. Removing a ship's hull required weeks of labor and yielded only salvaged wood. Burying it took days and immediately created sellable land parcels worth thousands of dollars. The city prioritized real estate velocity over material recovery, inadvertently preserving the ships in anaerobic mud that prevented decay. San Francisco city engineering records archived at the public library show property sales recorded before the landfill had even reached the height of the original waterline. This is the only American example of a city that chose burial over archaeology in real time. Not ancient ruins discovered centuries later, but contemporary infrastructure deliberately entombed while still recognizable. The new land appeared on maps almost immediately, with property lines drawn and lots sold before the fill had fully settled, and the financial district rose above a foundation no one thought to document. In 1978, construction workers excavating for a new building at Clay and Battery Streets struck the intact hull of the Niantic, 22 feet below street level. The ship's hull contained preserved cargo, rubber boots, champagne bottles still sealed, a ship's compass, rats' nests made from Chinese newspapers. Bronze plaques now mark the old 1849 shoreline along downtown streets. The current waterfront is 4 blocks away. When archaeologists excavated the Niantic, they discovered that its burial had been so rapid and complete that the ship's interior remained in near-pristine condition. Because the landfill sealed out oxygen, organic materials survived as if the ship had sunk in deep water rather than been buried on land. Items that would have rotted in normal soil remained intact, making the ships better preserved than most actual underwater wrecks. The excavation report by Pastron from San Francisco State University documents leather goods, textiles, and wooden objects showing no decay after more than a century underground. Every major city contains buried layers of its own past. But San Francisco is unique in that its foundational layer is mobile architecture, vessels designed for movement, permanently frozen in place. What we consider permanent urban infrastructure may be merely the temporary immobilization of something fundamentally transient. The financial district's glass towers rise from foundations that punch through the hulls of ships whose names we are still discovering. You can stand on the corner of Clay and Montgomery Streets today, where the bronze shoreline plaque marks water that has not existed for for 170 years, and know that 40 feet beneath the sidewalk lies a ship that once crossed Cape Horn. The San Francisco Maritime Museum's ongoing archaeological documentation reveals new hull fragments every few years as subway expansions and building renovations cut deeper into the old waterfront. We build cities by forgetting what came before, but San Francisco forgot while the ships were still visible, transforming them from disaster to foundation without pause. If a city can bury its own chaos so completely that discovery requires drilling through it decades later, what are we standing on right now that we have chosen not to see?